Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're diving into a truly fascinating explainer. We're going to break down some heavily discussed and honestly pretty controversial source material about a radical shift in dating psychology. We're talking about what happens when you take the principles of Machiavelli and apply them to modern relationships. Now look, our goal here isn't to judge the source material. We're just here to unpack these core arguments logically so you can really understand what this whole mindset is actually all about. So let's just jump right in.
The source material kicks things off with this incredibly piercing question. Why is it that ordinary guys who do literally everything right, saying the sweet words, buying the gifts, always being available, inevitably end up forgotten? Well, according to this framework, most men just completely misunderstand how attraction works. They think, hey, if I just shower someone with enough affection, I'll be loved and remembered. But the argument we're looking at today claims that this overly accommodating approach basically guarantees you'll be replaced in a matter of days. Crazy, right?
And that brings us to the core concept, Machiavellian Dark Psychology. Now, when this is applied to dating, the source is definitely not telling men to become villains or to go around begging for love. Not at all. It's entirely about becoming mentally unforgettable. The whole point isn't to chase someone or desperately seek their approval. Instead, the strategy is all about emotional dominance. It's about framing yourself in a way that creates a really profound fear of loss. It's about being that person whose memory just kind of sticks in their head, even when you aren't in the room. Getting a handle on this really gives you a unique lens into how power dynamics fundamentally play out in relationships.
So, to really grasp how this argument is built, we're going to walk through its 5-step psychological roadmap today. We'll start with the ordinary boy's mistake, move on to the power of fear, check out the lion and fox principle, dig into the game of silence and absence, and wrap it all up with the real mindset shift.
All right, starting with part 1, the ordinary boy's mistake.
The source identifies a fatal error here, and it happens when a man makes himself constantly available. He's just freely giving away his affection without offering any sort of challenge whatsoever. And when you do that, the argument is that your presence literally loses all its value. You become super comfortable, sure, but ultimately, you become ignorable. You're basically just background music. Think about it, human nature kind of dictates that if we get something without a challenge, it just loses its intrinsic appeal. So this philosophy really stresses that trying to win someone over just by being super accommodating is actually broadcasting weakness.
Moving right along to part 2, the power of fear.
It is safer to be feared than loved. You've probably heard that one, right? It's a famous, pretty brutal Machiavellian maxim, and it is the absolute cornerstone of this second pillar. Now, let me be super clear about this distinction. The source is absolutely not talking about physical intimidation, shouting, or being a bully. In fact, those are labeled as major signs of weakness. What we're talking about here is totally psychological. It's the fear of losing you.
So, how do you actually cultivate that specific kind of fear? Well, it all comes down to framing your image. People don't have a scanner for your internal feelings. They read your energy and your confidence. To keep that frame strong, you've got to establish rock-solid boundaries. If you're disrespected, you don't argue, you just silently walk away. And then there's this fascinating 80-20 rule the source brings up. You should only reveal 80% of who you are. Keep the remaining 20% completely hidden. By holding on to that bit of mystery, you're forcing the other person's imagination to do all the heavy lifting. They're left chasing the unknown parts of you.
Which leads us nicely into part 3, the lion and fox principle.
This principle is based on the idea that women will subconsciously test men to figure out their mental strength and stability. And how you handle those tests, that's everything. Most guys get flustered, they apologize, and boom, they lose the game. But the source says to master this, you have to play the role of both the lion and the fox. If you're dealing with emotional drama or an outburst, be the fox. Be the calm observer. You just watch, give zero dramatic reaction, and let the chaos literally bounce off you like a brick wall. But, and this is key, if a core personal boundary gets crossed, that's when you become the lion. Completely unmoving, rigid. You don't need to shout or make threats. Your utter stillness commands respect. You don't even explain yourself, because according to this mindset, true power never has to explain itself.
All right, let's look at part 4, the game of silence and absence. The source compares this dynamic to a casino effect, and it's incredibly potent. When a boundary is broken, the punishment has to be delivered all at once. We're talking complete, total, silent withdrawal. Not a single word of explanation. It acts like a mirror, forcing the other person to sit there wondering if you're ever going to come back. On the flip side, rewards for good behavior should be given out in these tiny little drops. Just a brief smile, maybe a really slight compliment. Because the reward is so unpredictable and so small, it keeps the other person hooked. It keeps them playing the game and builds this really intense, driving obsession.
So how is this absence actually executed? The source lays out 4 very precise steps. First, your presence has to actually have value to begin with, otherwise they won't care if you leave. Step 2, you disappear. Suddenly, no fighting, no dramatic exit. Step 3 leans on the psychological claim that people absolutely hate a vacuum. If there's sudden silence, they will obsessively try to fill that void with thoughts of you, overanalyzing every single past interaction. And finally, step 4, when you do return, you have to be completely calm and unbothered. You're proving that you have ultimate control over your own emotions.
And that brings us to our final section, Part 5, the real mindset shift.
Here's the thing. If you just treat these concepts like cheap pickup lines, the source insists you are going to fail, hard. This isn't about parlor tricks. It requires a total reconstruction of your self-worth. The ultimate goal here is control. It's about shifting the center of reality without ever raising your voice or begging for anyone's attention. The big takeaway is that true power is felt, it's not shown. And that power begins the exact second you stop starving for another person's approval. You aren't there to be the entertainer or to prove your worth. You are simply there as an immovable force.
So I'll leave you with this final provocative thought. We've unpacked the trap of constant availability, the psychological weight behind the fear of loss, the delicate balance of being the lion and the fox, and the absolute commanding power of sudden absence. So, are you ready to stop playing the standard game? Do you reconstruct your mindset to command this level of emotional dominance, or do you just stay comfortably and maybe forgettably in the 99%? Honestly, whether you choose to adopt this mindset or reject it entirely, just understanding these dynamics means you're going to start spotting them out there in the real world. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and remember, always keep questioning the world around you.